You're about to fail a test and you'll see it coming. Picture two checks sitting on a table. One is $100 you can cash today. The other is $120, but only if you wait a month. You take the 100, like almost everyone does, and honestly that feels completely reasonable. Now slide both of those checks a year into the future. $100 in 12 months or $120 in 13. It's the same extra 20 for the same single month of waiting, and suddenly you're happy to wait. Nothing about the money changed. The only thing that changed is how close it got to you. In 1999, the economists Ted O'Donoghue and Matthew Rabin gave this little glitch its modern name, present bias. Psychologists call the wider version temporal discounting. The idea is that your brain never keeps one steady exchange rate for time. It runs on a curve, and that curve is bent, and that bend is quietly running your whole morning. It's the alarm you set with total confidence at midnight and then murder at 6. It's the gym you pay for and never walk into, and the savings plan that always starts next month. By the end of this video, you'll understand why the bend is there, why some brains have it cranked up to triple volume, and the one move that actually beats it, which probably isn't the move you've been trying. Let's deal with the lazy explanation first, the one where some people are disciplined, some people aren't, and you're simply weak. Here's why that falls apart. In 1998, two researchers called Daniel Reed and Barbara van Leeuwen visited a string of workplaces around Amsterdam, banks and insurance offices, and even a hospital. They offered people a free snack to be delivered 1 week later, either fruit or a chocolate bar. Choosing for next week, the group split almost evenly, with 51% going for chocolate and 49% for fruit. Very sensible, very virtuous. Then, the week passed, the snacks actually showed up, and the same people got to choose again for right now. This time, 83% grabbed the chocolate. Of everyone who had nobly picked fruit in advance, about 3 out of 4 flipped. Same person, same snack, same office, and the only thing that moved was the clock. If discipline were really a fixed trait, it wouldn't come with a 1-week expiration date. So what is actually moving here? In 1981, the economist Richard Thaler put a number on it. He asked people a brutally simple question. Would you rather have $15 today, or how much would it take for you to happily wait instead? To wait 3 months, the median answer was $30, double the money for 90 days of patience. If you run that as an interest rate, it comes out to 277% a year. But when he asked them to wait 3 full years, people only demanded $100, which works out to an annual rate of 63%. Read those two numbers again because they really should not fit inside the same head. The longer wait got the lower rate. Your impatience isn't a steady cost you can budget around, it's a spike, and the spike sits right on top of the word now. Here's the picture I want you to hold on to. If you hold a coin an inch from your eye, it blots out the sun. The close reward isn't actually bigger, it's just closer. A coin is never worth more than the sun, it just happens to be standing in front of it. Now for the man behind the curve. Back in 1975, in the journal Psychological Bulletin, George Ainslie called this a specious reward, and he drew the graph that quietly explains every broken diet in history. Value doesn't slide down gently as a reward moves into the future. It drops along a hyperbola, almost flat while the reward is far away, then nearly vertical once it gets close. Picture two of those curves, a small reward arriving soon, and a big reward arriving later. From a distance, the big one is obviously higher, so you plan your life around it. But as the small reward gets close, its curve shoots straight up and crosses right over the bigger one. Your preference doesn't slowly drift across, it snaps at a distance you could have predicted in advance, right on schedule. You don't abandon your plans get ambushed. In 2004, a team led by Sam McClure, working with the economists David Leibson and George Lowenstein, slid 14 people into an fMRI scanner and watched that ambush happen in real time. They published it in Science. The setup was money now against more money later, choice after choice. Whenever an option was available today, the limbic system lit up, that old dopamine-soaked machinery that only cares about what it can have this second. Meanwhile, the lateral prefrontal cortex, the part of you that runs spreadsheets, stayed calmly engaged on every choice, near or far, at exactly the same cool level. 2 bidders, 1 auction. And the uncomfortable thing the study suggested was that whichever bidder shouted louder is what predicted the actual choice. When the limbic bid spiked, people grabbed the cash. You can feel this from the inside, by the way. The voice that says, "I want it," and the voice that says, "It's worth it," really are 2 different voices coming from 2 genuinely separate systems in your head. That's not poetry, it's anatomy. Which brings us to the most famous willpower experiment ever run, and the part of it that almost nobody ever quotes. It started at Stanford in 1968. Walter Mischel sat 653 preschoolers down, one at a time, in front of a treat, usually a marshmallow, sometimes a cookie, sometimes pretzels. They could eat one right now, or wait alone for up to 15 or 20 minutes and get 2, with a little bell on the table they could ring whenever they wanted to give up. A whole culture got built on what came next. In 1990, Yuichi Shoda and Mischel published the follow-up. And the children who had waited the longest were now teenagers, scoring dramatically higher on the SAT. Patience looked like destiny. Except that famous link came from barely 3 dozen kids using scores their parents reported, all from one corner of one very affluent campus. In 2018, Tyler Watts, Greg Duncan, and Haonan Chuan reran the whole thing on 918 children from every kind of background. The famous correlation came back about half the size. And once they controlled for family income and early ability, it almost completely vanished. So was the marshmallow test a myth? Not quite. Something in that room was real. It just wasn't willpower. If you watch the kids who actually made it to 2 marshmallows, you notice they don't sit there staring the treat down. They cover their eyes, they turn their chairs around, they sing little songs to themselves. They don't try to outmuscle the temptation. They quietly make it disappear. Hold on to that, because this is where the curve stops being a quirk and turns into a dial. Some brains run this exact math with the bend turned way up. In 2016, Gillian Jackson and James McKillop pooled 25 separate comparisons covering nearly 4,000 people and found that people with ADHD discount delayed rewards more steeply on average than people without it. And this was not a one-off. In 2021, Ivo Marx ran the entire analysis again with a completely separate team. 37 comparisons across roughly 3,700 people and landed on the same tilt in the same direction. One detail in his data should stop you cold. When the rewards were real instead of hypothetical, the gap roughly doubled, The more touchable the reward, the harder the curve bends. Same machinery, same auction, the volume knob just turned up. Which means every time you've called yourself lazy or called somebody else undisciplined, you were really just yelling at a curve. So add up what the spike has quietly billed you. Every snooze is that $100 check all over again. Every "I'll start Monday" counts too. And notice the diet never starts on a Thursday, because Monday is never actually today. The course you bought and never opened, the savings app you downloaded and never funded. None of those were single decisions you made once. They were auctions you lost at point-blank range, one ordinary morning at a time. So here is the real reveal. You cannot win this auction in the moment. Nobody can. And that is exactly what Thaler's 277% is telling you. It applies to everyone. The people who look disciplined aren't standing there outstaring marshmallows, they're rigging the auction before it ever starts. Ainslie saw this too, and he reached for the oldest story we have. Ulysses wanted to hear the sirens, and he knew he wouldn't be able to resist them, so he had himself tied to the mast while the ship was still far from the rocks. He never tried to out-sing the song, he just made the decision in the one place the song couldn't reach him. That's the entire move, and you have been watching people do it your whole life under other names. It's the transfer that leaves your account the night before payday. It's the phone that charges in another room. It's the junk food that simply never makes it into the house because the curve can't spike on a snack that isn't there. Distance is the only place you're genuinely sane, so that's where you decide, and that's where you sign. But you do have to check your knots, because this curve eats soft promises for breakfast. If you can undo the whole thing in 10 seconds at 6 in the morning, you didn't tie a rope, you tied a bow. The transfer has to be automatic. The phone has to live in another room, not face down next to your pillow. A rope you can untie one-handed was never really a rope. Tie the real ones, and then you can let the curve scream all it likes. So go back to those 2 checks, the 100 today and the 120 next month. You're going to meet them again this week, wearing the disguise of a snooze button, an open tab, or a quiet "just one more." And you'll feel that coin slide in front of the sun. That feeling has nothing to do with weakness. It's the oldest pricing software you own, doing exactly the job it was built for, which is to grab whatever's close, because for almost all of human history, close was everything there was. You're not broken. You're just running ancient code in a world that finally pays compound interest. The moment you stop trying to outwill the spike and start making the decision from a distance, you become someone the curve simply cannot ambush. Not because you're suddenly stronger than everyone else, but because you're never standing where it hits. The coin only wins while you're holding it up to your eye. So put it down and look at the sun.